talk about now is again also on the key theme and key topic we had yesterday, also about the future model or the future operating model that we have to achieve and deploy within the company, and how to achieve this. So how can we, if we have defined a future model for our organization, how can we deploy this or bring this into our company, also scale this in our company? And this was also a little bit a topic of your workshop.
Yes.
That will be also redone later on, but now it's your talk on this, and happy to have you with us here. So a short introduction maybe from your side for those people who haven't been here yesterday. Cerys, you are what you're doing?
That's a good question. So I, no, this way maybe. Oh, I need this. So I am the lead consultant at Postshift. I have the great privilege to work alongside Lee Bryant, who I know many of you know. And one of my favourite challenges about that job is taking a lot of the brilliant things that he thinks about and turning them into real-life, actionable digital transformation programs. And that is probably the biggest challenge of my job, because Lee is a brilliant thinker. He's very far-reaching and has some brilliant ideas about how to bring digital transformation to the world, and it's my job to make that practical and real for people, and I love that.
It's your stage.
Thank you very much. So, as I said, Postshift is it's a small consultancy. We're based in London, but we are all what I would call hybrids. We all work at the intersection between lots of different fields, and that is, for me, what makes Postshift a wonderful place to work. We've been implementing social technologies, I'm sure many of you know, since about 2002. We used to be called Headshift, Postshift. There's a journey there somewhere. But what I want to talk to you about today is really some of the how-to of implementing digital transformation in the reality of big, complex, large organisations. So we've been pioneering this kind of model in both super large organisations, guys like Bosch, where we've been very fortunate to work very closely with the transformation team and also the business units. There are about 380,000 people, and we also get to work with some smaller, faster moving companies around the 3,000 to 5,000 mark based in the UK. But what strikes me whenever I talk to organisations is that although technology moves on apace in organisations, actually management thinking until quite recently has been very static. We were very focused on very kind of tayloristic methods of managing people. And that's really because trust within the organisation between management and the employees had broken down. If we can't trust the employees, then we'll trust the process. And we'll focus on those processes, make those processes as lean and as efficient as possible in order to get work done faster. And I think we've reached a point now where actually this is no longer working for our organisations. In the current connected world that we have, where employees are connected both inside and outside the organisation, actually the current system is starting to break down. And actually this is something we learned from implementing social technology in hundreds of organisations over about a 10-year period. When we ended Headshift, we stepped back, took some time to look at what we'd done, look at what we'd achieved, and to see if we'd achieved our original mission. And actually we found that we'd come up against the same barriers time and time again. And those barriers were about the organisational structure, the culture, the ways of working, and the leadership. So we'd managed to change a lot about how people on the ground got work done, but we hadn't made as much impact as maybe we could have done in other areas. And I think that as we move into building a connected world, which is what many of our clients are interested in doing right now, we see that only a connected company can truly offer the level of value that's needed. And a connected company for us is one who is able to step outside of their silos, to offer products that cross the hardware, software, data, user experience barriers that are often in place in our organisation, to create truly connected experiences for their customers. And that is truly a challenge if you're not connected that way internally. So someone earlier mentioned the Gutenberg press. I think it was Paul Miller. And the Gutenberg press is, for me, one of the best examples of combinatorial innovation, the combining of things which already existed in the world to create something spectacularly new. And as our organisations move towards creating connected products, connected services, business platforms on which to grow, that's exactly what we're doing. We're creating combinatorial innovations within our own organisations, and we absolutely cannot do that if we're trapped inside the silos of structure, even the silos that technology creates for us. And that's something we definitely want to challenge. In this fast-moving world, however, a lot of people have commented today and indeed yesterday that actually there's no single target operating model for an organisation anymore. There's no single thing that it's trying to grow into. So if our target is a moving one, and if we're not sure of what the end point will be, if there is even an end point, then how can we proceed in this? How can we keep that overview of distributed change that's going on inside our organisation, something we talked about a little bit in the workshop that I ran yesterday? And for us, our starting point was actually to take some innovation from Toyota and the Toyota production system. I don't know how many of you have come across the Toyota production system, but it is a very extensive and well thought through system for producing innovative products, and is described in terms of knowledge, in terms of tools, in terms of techniques. And for us, this was a great starting point for thinking about what an organisation needs to enable itself to change. So we started work on something that we call an agile company system. So how can a company move from where it is today to where it needs to be in the future? What are the tools? What are the techniques? What are the knowledge that is needed? Our first challenge was actually to think through what kind of attributes a future organisation might need to have. What are the things that it needs to be in order to embody some of those 21st century business values that a few people have talked about? Things like being decentralised. So Amadeus was talking to us today about how they're very truly decentralised, having only a small HQ and very strong regional offices, which in some ways lead the business. How they can be resilient, how they can be agile and iterative, how they can be innovative, purpose and passion-led, data-driven, collaborative. All of these are attributes of a company, but they don't tell you how to change the company. They just give you some things to work towards. And that thing that we're working towards is an organisational system that is sentient, so it understands and has some awareness about itself. It's evolutionary, and to some extent, it's alive. And actually, I prefer that description of what an organisation should become and how we're trying to change it to actually changing the operating system. An operating system for a company sounds very mechanistic. It sounds very technology-driven, when actually we're looking to be more sentient, more alive, and more evolutionary. But of course, how can we do that? So for me, there are a number of key areas that we need to work on to understand why the organisation needs to change, what the value add of that change should be, how to make the change, and then to measure the impact of that change. Now, these questions are really important to consider each in turn. And you don't necessarily have to take them in order when you're undertaking a digital transformation. I think some people on Twitter have been talking about the separation between top-down and the needs of bottom-up growth. And actually, those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can start at the bottom and grow some really great grassroots initiatives, but eventually, in order to spread that behaviour wider, you will need to find the why, the overarching organisational purpose in order to get some buy-in from leadership to move further. Similarly, you can start with the why and you can push down from there. It's not a mutually exclusive thing. So first of all, digital transformation leads to new organisational attributes. So we've talked about what some of those attributes could be, but how can we uncover the why and how can we look at the value add of the digital transformation? First of all, uncovering the why. Now, the why for me is all about either your organisation's or business unit's strategy. What's the why for digital transformation? Some examples that I have from clients I've been working with in the last couple of weeks. Firstly, a need to double sales by 2020. That's something they can't do in the current model they're working in. So they need to transform in order to fulfill that goal. So it's nothing to do with digital, but it is all about the business strategy and where it needs to go. And I think that's crucial for explaining the why. Secondly, exploring the need states. This is what some people refer to as the value add, some people describe as the what for. And again, I think this is important because we have to realise that not every piece of the organisation needs to become responsive or agile or work in a different way. Actually, some pieces of the organisation are already working in the best way that they can. If we take a manufacturing company, for example, it will have many, many products which are already fully commoditised. They're producing under lean manufacturing principles. It's very smooth, it's very clean, and they achieve everything they need to do with no waste. It's not appropriate to introduce agile ways of working into that process. It doesn't add any value for them. However, what we could do is pull together several of those commoditized products, wrap a service around them, and then start to think about a connected service offering. Then you are going to need some of those agile working methods, some of those ways to work across silos, which our organisations don't currently allow us to do. So I think it's really important that we understand that these kinds of ways of working, these structures are right in some pieces of our organisation, but not necessarily in others. When exploring the need states, there are 4 key inputs that I work through with my clients in a workshop setting. And it's really important that this is done collaboratively because they know their business so much better than I do. All I'm offering is some tools to help them think through what they need to do. So the first input, and it's one that gets talked about a huge amount, is the market dynamics. What's going on in the external market that is forcing change for your business, that are producing the opportunities and threats that you can leverage. So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is another external thing, which is what's the ecosystem that your business is operating in? Are there startups challenging you and eating up at the edges of your business? Are there new competitors that are coming out of left field that you would never have thought of from the technology sector, for example? What's the wider ecosystem you're playing in? Then we have 2 distinctly internal areas that I think it's important to think about. The first of which is what are the pain points that your business unit is experiencing on a daily basis? What are the things that you can potentially solve using digital transformation as a vehicle? And then the 4th and last thing, and the one that gets overlooked quite a lot, I think, is what are the business models that are already active within your unit or within your business, and how can we push them to the next level? How can we make them more service-orientated or more platform-orientated? And how can we use that to drive new opportunities for the business to address some of those risks that came out of the market dynamics? So they're the 4 key inputs for explaining and exploring the need states for digital transformation. And out of these things, we can identify what we call target capabilities, but are actually much more simply described as what are the capabilities that your business is trying to grow for the future? What is it that your business needs to be able to do to address those risks and opportunities that are coming at you? Once we understand something about those capabilities, and we describe capabilities in terms of agile user stories for the organisation. So anyone who's familiar with agile methodologies that came out of the software industry will know that one of the reasons we started using agile user stories in that arena was to ensure that, firstly, the business could feel ownership of the requirements. Secondly, that we could measure progress against the implementation of those agile user stories. And third, to ensure that we understood something about the person we were designing and building for. And I think the same needs to be true of the user stories that we build for our organisations. We need to be able to describe in the business language what it is we're trying to grow, why we're trying to grow it, and the audience for that capability. And those things are really important to being able to move forward with a digital transformation. One of the tools we've been working on recently is actually to create a capability map of the organisation. Much like what enterprise architects used to create existing business capability maps based on processes, we need to define the capability map of the future so that our organisation knows where it's focused, where the overlaps are, and how it can move forward towards those new capabilities. The next really important step that we need to understand is how we move from capabilities to change actions. So capabilities aren't magically going to manifest themselves within our organisation. We need to take change actions each and every week, and in preference have those distributed across the organisation so that it is not a central team working with parts of the organisation to push the change out, but actually is people on the ground who understand the process, understand the why, and can see better how things should be implemented. So that's small steps towards bigger changes being distributed across the organisation. And of course, it was a great introduction by Michael Silverman earlier on the concept of using collaborative intelligence to understand what's going on inside our business. We would also want to see organisations tracking the data. Some of the attributes that we talked about are easy to track using data, others not so much, and we most definitely need the human inputs into that. And we would always hope that organisations could use a collaboration of both quant and qual data to understand better what's going on, understand how you're moving towards those capabilities. So understanding key data sets, we have a lot of them inside of our enterprise social networks. They can tell us really good things about how collaborative our organisation is, how open our organisation is, how decentralised our organisation is. But we can also use the human sensor network that we have access to through our ESNs to understand even more, taking small pulse surveys, so small surveys that show you how the organisation is feeling about very detailed things at any given time in their flow of work, can be a really useful tool. And finally, to wrap those things up inside an easy-to-communicate system, we like to help organisations to share those success stories, the failures, the ways of working, share key readings, many of them, many inspired by the talks we've had today. And this can be a great role for the central team to play. They can be gathering those success stories, sharing them more widely, helping to communicate what's going on inside the business. So embodying an overall system for change using both content and success stories, sharing those stories, harbouring our network of change agents who we really need to be active in our local communities to be able to spread the change, oversee how things are going, and maybe raise some issues. So this is roughly what that system looks like when it's put into practice. So it's a very simplified view. But if you look at the top, where planning, the inspiration coming from the external threats, the organisational strategy, this is really about expressing the why. Why do we need to change? On the left-hand side here, we have the area where we discover those need states, how we need to uncover external market dynamics, the business models that are being used that we can build upon, those associate-driven pain points, and the new structures that are available to us. In the centre, we have our target capability map. So that's what are the capabilities that are being grown across the organisation. The right-hand side, the change actions, and underpinning it all, a focus on measurement and showing progress. Now, although this was originally designed as a model for change, it actually also translates itself really nicely into a model for communication. And this is the second way that we've been using this very simple model to drive forward some of those very distributed programs. One of the challenges within a distributed program is to show leadership how and where the organisation is changing and for what purpose. And by using the same communication framework, even though the change that is different that's happening in every business unit, you can quickly create a rationalised overview of how the organisation is changing and what its focus is. So that's the second purpose of this very simple model. One of the biggest challenges I think that we've come across when implementing this with our clients is actually how to make the transition. How do you go from being one thing to being another? Now, some of these change actions that we recommend can be really granular. They can be about ways of working. They can be about culture. They can be about behaviour. Actually, some of the toughest things to change are the big things like structure. Things that naturally are very difficult for individuals to engage with because there's a lot of emotion bound up in them. Your place in the organisation potentially feels very hard won. You know, it's linked to ego and self-esteem and all sorts of very difficult things to change. So although we can make some changes iteratively, there are also some things that we need to make very clear transition plans for. And some of those things include structure. So someone mentioned earlier on that actually there's no one structure that fits an organisation at any given time. And that's absolutely borne out by what we've seen within organisations over the years. So you can see here, this is a very quick map of how some different things organisations need to do can be fulfilled quicker, more effectively, more efficiently by different types of organising principles. So, for example, if we take again a manufacturing organisation, which this map was created for, we have the actual manufacturing piece is delivered really well. The lean manufacturing piece is delivered really well by a hierarchy, really well. Things like safety standards, quality standards, all of those things need to be in place, and therefore a decision-making hierarchy, shorter than the standard ones you'd see in organisations, but hierarchy nonetheless, is a really important component. However, if you're talking about things like learning, we know that learning is delivered actually not by hierarchy, but instead by community. Mostly communities of practice, sometimes networks, but definitely not by a hierarchy. So we need to be able to leverage different types of organisational structure depending on what it is we're trying to achieve. So how can we do this? So the phases don't really matter, but it was just our way of trying to break down the thought process that we need to go through when we're focusing particularly on structure change. And one method, and I'm not saying this is the only method by any stretch, was firstly to select the slice of the organisation that's about to be changed. So not doing it all at once, but selecting a good slice, one that, you know, in an ideal world would have a set of processes that it owns, products, services, etc. Understand a bit about it. Understand how it really works. Is the structure you see on the org chart really the structure it operates in? Are there influencers who are maybe making it work better than the leader of the business unit? Then we do this exercise to x-ray what the pivot points are. What are the pieces in that puzzle that you cannot move, that you cannot change? They tend to be leaders. They tend to be influencers. Those are the people who are going to help you make it work. And we recommend using those as pivot points and building new pieces of structure around those crucial pieces. We then also bring in, of course, a focus on the customer. In this particular instance, the business unit we were working with are incredibly customer focused. They're a consumer division, they're very fast moving, and they have a lot of challenges in the marketplace. So they need to be incredibly customer focused. So at the same time as thinking about what are the key pivot points within the structure of the organisation, we also consider what are the key customer points that you cannot remove, that you cannot break. And you can also use those as pivot points to build new structures around them. And then finally, we come to consider what's the role that your ESN can play? Because a lot of people have spent an awful lot of time developing their ESNs, and they have a crucial role for us in terms of digital transformation. And it's really important that we use them well and we use them in the right way. So for us, social technology has always been just a step in the journey, possibly the first step, but one that allowed us to have communities, to have better ways of working, to leverage new tools and technology quickly. But we also want to build more on top of that. We want to build new team structures, things like agile teams, podular teams from Dave Gray's work, We want to build networks and communities more widely than we do now. We want to be more data-driven in the way that we work, and we can use the ESN to do that. The ESN has a huge amount of data inside of it, which very few organisations ever leverage. So taking that data, looking for key insights. What's the value of collaboration? Where are the black spots of collaboration inside of your business, and how can you address those? Are there opportunities where you could join teams together to make them more effective using your ESN rather than changing the structure? And then finally, building on that to move towards the new future of work, which we've been talking about today. In this transition and in this process of digital transformation, that almost never-ending process of transformation, we always need to be capturing those new needs, the new dynamics, the new ways of working that the organisation wants to embody. And an ESN is a perfect way to do that. By crowdsourcing and using the collective intelligence of our organisations to identify what those need states are and how we can start to move towards them, we can leverage that human sensor network inside our organisations to better effect. We can use our ESN to measure and display progress. So because some of these transformation efforts, especially moves to things like being open, being collaborative, being data-driven, can be really long journeys, it's really important for us to show the organisation how it's moving towards these things, or in fact how it's moving away from them. If we've set a core value of, for example, openness, but 70% of the communities we create are closed, then we're actually moving away from openness, not towards it. And it's important for the organisation to understand that. And then finally, we can use it to distribute change actions across the organisation. We can help the whole organisation to be aware of what's going on, but to distribute appropriately. And this kind of connectivity really allows us to leverage the superpower that we have nowadays in the organisation, which is all about connectedness. Connectedness, being networked, that really is the core superpower we need to leverage as we go through our digital transformation journey. That's everything I had to say.
Great. Thank you, Cerys. Any questions in the room? So then I would ask at least one question, because everybody's waiting for the lunch break, certainly.
I know.
But still,
you can always grab me outside.
Interesting talk, and certainly a very important talk. So the key essence for me is also as a success factors for driving the digital transformation is really bringing up the transparency about the progress. So closing the feedback loop from the enterprise social network and the usage, and then bring this back to the user and to the organization. So are there any recommendations on how to present those insights again, that they have an effect on an even better progress?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's a really good point, and I think that measurement is a key differentiator for good digital transformation programs, showing progress against whatever it is you're trying to achieve, whether it's capabilities or some other model that you're using. I think that lessons we've learned is that data needs to be as close to real time as possible. It doesn't need to be perfect, as long as you explain why it's not perfect, and that's mostly humans. None of us are perfect. And I think that it needs to be actionable. So some of the most interesting work we've done over the years is to show where there's enough weight around a particular topic to make it a signal that the organisation needs to talk about it. And again, ESN data around topics, around collaboration, can be a great way to identify that.
Great. Thank you, Cerys, again.
Thank you.
Yes. And we are moving forward now to our lunch break.